puberty.
What's up, Bigfooters? My name is Brady, and today we'll be discussing whether or not we should do Bigfoot calls when out in the field. Now, before we begin, I would like to mention that I am currently sick, so if my voice sounds a little weird, that is why, but let's just jump right into this topic. Even though Bigfoot calls were used before the show aired, the tactic of using Bigfoot calls was popularized by the Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot. And because of this, Bigfooters debate why we should or shouldn't do calls in attempts to attract Sasquatches or try to get a response. In this video, I will cover both sides of this argument and then provide my personal thoughts. So first, I'm going to start off with why we should not be doing Bigfoot calls. The first point, and really an obvious point, is making loud noises is going to scare away all of the wildlife in the area. If we're just out there making loud, crazy noises, wildlife is going to be all scared away, and that may even include Sasquatches. Another point as to why we should not be doing Bigfoot calls is that while we're doing our calls and getting responses, we may just be calling back and forth with other researchers, and in the end that just turns out to be really counterproductive. And then you go home and report your encounters, and it's just misinformation, and it kind of skews the data in a way. A lot of people also argue that if Sasquatches have a language, doing calls would be similar to a gorilla trying to speak English. Our attempts at doing Bigfoot calls would sound like just that, attempts at Bigfoot calls, and we wouldn't be able to fool them with our own attempts. Now personally, I'm not sure that the loud howls and screams are part of their language. I think it's probably just a long-distance communication tactic to signal that you're in the area or to find other Sasquatches in the area. So I'm not sure it'd be like a language, but I think us doing Sasquatch calls would also be similar to a gorilla trying to mock a human tone of voice, not necessarily trying to speak English. And because of this, a Bigfoot would easily be able to tell that you're not one of them. And then again, they would just flee the area and completely leave you alone. My advice would be to definitely not vocalize if you're trying to set up a habituation or extended interaction site, which leads into my next point, why and when we should do Bigfoot calls. I think it is completely fine to do calls on single overnight camps or when just night hiking in an area. If you're just choosing a spot you occasionally go to or have never been, calling is a fine way of getting some sort of response, because at that point, your chances of encountering a Sasquatch in that unfamiliar area is similar to finding a needle in a haystack. And I think doing calls is kind of an effective way of whittling down some of that hay. Which is why I think it's fine on Finding Bigfoot that they do these calls, because they go to their one night investigation location and they're there for that night. They're not even hiking around during the day, I don't think. They investigate the reports and then they go to their night investigation spot. And I think that's really a stab in the dark at best, so I don't blame them for doing calls, because honestly it's kind of the best chance they have at that point. So I think them doing calls on Finding Bigfoot is completely fine. I think it is much better than just wandering through the woods and hoping something happens. They're at least attempting to draw in a Sasquatch or elicit a response of some kind.
The purpose of going out and making sounds is to get responses to the sounds, responses from a Sasquatch. The strategy of ping-ponging calls back and forth kind of mimics what Sasquatches will do in the wild. And we found in the past on expeditions when we mimicked that, we did these howls back and forth to each other over a long distance. That tended to get us better action faster than if it was just doing it from one point.
And, honestly, it's not like doing calls doesn't work. If doing calls has never worked before over the decades that it's been used, then nobody would still be doing them. The reason that people are still doing calls is because they've gotten results from their calls.
Did you hear that? Yeah. Tell them we got a response. Okay.
It's not like they're doing it for no reason and it's never worked in the past. They continue to do it because they have gotten positive results from doing calls. Personally, I've gotten responses to calls we've made.
There it was again.
And I've heard unsolicited vocalizations while in the field. So really in the end, it all comes down to personal preference. If you like doing calls, then continue to do calls. I think it's a fine way of narrowing down your focus sometimes, in those circumstances that you're only doing like an overnight investigation or just doing a night hike. I think a very happy medium would be using wood knocks instead of calls. Wood knocks are a very passive form of communication. It wouldn't be really considered a form of harassment of wildlife. It's not like a loud, obnoxious vocalization. It's a pretty passive form of close-distance communication. And you don't need to impersonate what may be another language. It's not like the wood knocks have an accent. Now, the number of wood knocks that Sasquatches use may mean different things. 2 wood knocks could mean people are nearby. 3 could mean the coast is clear. We don't really know that, but at this point, I think wood knocks are really our best bet. All you need to do is just hit a tree with a piece of wood, really. Or you can clap your hands, you can rock clack. It's just really a very simple passive form of communication. They could be used in new locations and in interaction sites. If you're investigating what you hope to eventually become an interaction site, you could utilize wood knocks to your advantage. For one example, if you leave gifts in the exact same location every time, and every time you put the gifts there you do 2 wood knocks, eventually that could be the equivalent of ringing the dinner bell for the local Sasquatches, and could eventually lead to interaction or documentation of some kind over a long period of time of you doing this technique. I really do encourage wood knocks. Call blasting using recorded vocalizations is also an option, but most recordings out there that have been captured aren't really the highest quality. There are a few good ones. There are a few that are really good and that would be usable for call blasting. But even then, maybe they would catch on to it being the same vocalization over and over again, and that might make them suspicious. But I think call blasting is still better than using our own vocals to make calls if you have the equipment for call blasting. Overall, I recommend calls in new locations or one-night trips. I think it's a perfectly fine technique, and I also recommend holding off on calls during longer trips and at your interaction sites. But really, I think using wood knocks could be effective in both scenarios. Do whatever works for you. If you have negative results all around, you don't get responses to wood knocks, you don't get responses to calls, then at that point I recommend trying something different. Just try new things, try new techniques until you can eventually get some positive results in the field. But really, I think that's all I have to say on this topic. With calls, I say go for it. It's fun. Every time I've brought out friends into the field and new investigators, I've taught them how to do calls because it's something to fall back on at least, and it's something fun to do in the woods while you're out there investigating. But really, that's all I have to say on this topic. I encourage you guys to share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you gotten positive results using calls in the past? Or are you of the mindset that we should not do calls at all? Please, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear what you guys have to say on this topic. And also be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps out this channel. And with that said, I think that's going to wrap up this short little video. Thank you all so much for listening. And as always, thanks for watching. Keep squatching.